Yeah, speakers are working great now. I want to thank you folks for coming tonight, especially on a St. Patty's Day. My name is Senta Holmes. I am from the Elkhorn Area School District Resiliency Coalition. And tonight we are going to be discussing drug awareness. I want to remind you folks, this is an in conversation. So if we are speaking and you have an urgent question, please ask, get us attention, because we want to have a conversation with us. It's not us speaking to you, it's both of us talking together. That's super vital right now. So I am going to introduce Mike. He is from the Walworth County Drug and Alcohol Coalition, and he's going to be starting off our discussion. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to put this up right now. Okay. Mike's already working, so you're good.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike Hinsky. I'm the retired principal of Bigfoot High School and have been actively involved with WALCODAC for the last 4 years, serving as the educational liaison between WALCODAC and the area high schools in Walworth County. This is an important session for us. This meeting tonight is about increasing people's awareness of the impact of drugs and alcohol within the confines of our communities. We know over the last year, in terms of dealing with COVID-19 and the aftermath of that and the mental health issues that have occurred, drug abuse and drug use has skyrocketed. And with that, of course, comes the issue of overdose. So we come to you tonight with the idea of presenting vital information, sharing some stories, sharing some critical facts, sharing resources with you in terms of how to address the issue that we're all so passionate about. So as we get started tonight, I want to talk just a little bit before I turn it over to Corey, and that is to talk to you first and foremost about the need for resources. As I said, I'm a principal. I'm a retired principal. And one of the things that was very apparent to me in my role as a principal was there were so many kids that needed help, so many kids that didn't know where to turn. It really found itself about 4 years ago. I was actually in a freshman health class, and I was doing a teacher observation. And in doing the teacher observation, they were doing a unit on alcohol and drugs. The teacher was doing a great job. The kids were engaged. The kids were really involved in what was going on. But as they got into it more and more and more, it was clear that there were kids that were dealing with the issue of drugs and substance abuse from outside themselves, and they clearly had nowhere to turn. They didn't know who to turn to. And so one of the things that we've looked at as a coalition, and one of the reasons why we're here tonight, is to share the importance of resources, of telling a trusted adult, going to a school counselor, going to someone that can help, and understanding that that we're not narking on people. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help them. We're trying to save a life. And that's what each of us up here do and try to do every day. And while I've focused already on kids, the other part of this equation that I want to talk about very quickly, and that is the elderly population. You know, when we talk about drug use and drug abuse and drug concerns, we so often focus on kids and young adults and adults. We know that we have a significant population of elderly within the confines of our communities. And in many cases, many of those elderly folks are dealing with substance abuse issues. As a principal, of course, I dealt with kids and substance abuse. As an adult, I dealt with a parent of substance abuse. And thank goodness for a doctor stepping in to actually put the brakes on an escalation in opiate painkiller use. So while we talk about kids, we also need to talk about helping our elderly and others who we know are struggling with addiction. and not necessarily addiction from illicit narcotics, but we're talking about addiction of prescription narcotics. And that's one of the things that we want to get through. And so as I turn this over to Corey tonight, again, I welcome all of you here. I hope that this is a very informative session for you. You're going to learn a little. We're going to share a little. We're going to provide you with resources to ideally help you in the long run. So I'm pleased to present Corey Newman.
All right, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. As Mike said, my name is Corey Newman. I am a law enforcement officer for approximately 16 years, in the Wisconsin Army National Guard for approximately 19 years, and for 4 years in my law enforcement career, I worked undercover narcotics. So over the course of that time, I spoke to hundreds of folks who had substance use disorder, scores of folks that sold illicit drugs for profit, worked hundreds of cases that involved transportation and sales and use of illicit narcotics. So I have a good base of experience and knowledge of this. I don't know everything, but I appreciate this opportunity. I am the vice chair of the Walworth County Drug and Alcohol Coalition. I've been doing that, as Mike said, for nearly 4 years now. We are very transparent about the problem because this is an issue that needs to have light shed on it. It does everyone a disservice if we aren't honest about the problem. So I am a blunt speaker because this is a blunt topic. It's something we need to be upfront and honest about. Some of the images I have in my presentation here that I believe is being shared online with all the folks that are watching online. There's some images on there that may be disturbing, but I appreciate this opportunity for us as a team to be transparent about this problem. So let's go ahead and get started here. We have a small audience here in the room, many more watching online, and this presentation, as I understand it, will be used at schools throughout the district and maybe beyond. So as I go through this drug IQ test, a little bit of an icebreaker. I'm not going to ask for crowd participation or anything here, but participation in this is not an admission of use. I'll just say that out loud. So drug slang changes nearly daily. It changes all the time. And it's really dependent on geographic location and a variety of other factors. So this is not an all-inclusive list. And keep in mind that the goalposts on drug slang changes all the time. So I'm going to give you a list of about 7 or so drug slang here. And if you know it, what I'm actually referring to, good for you. You're well informed. If you don't know it, at the end of listing these off, I'll tell you what they actually mean. Some of them are easy to figure out, some of them a little bit harder. Okay, so if I say Vikes, V-I-K-E-S, think about that one. You may or may not know it. Bud, I don't mean your bud you're sitting next to or watching online with, Bud. Jim Candy, Molly. Georgia Homeboy, Horse. And Tango and Cash. So Vikes, a little bit easier on that one. Vicodin, right? Prescription narcotic, like Mike alluded to, often obviously in a pill form. Vikes, similar to Perks, Oxys, that kind of thing. Prescription narcotics. And just at the outset here, keep in mind prescription narcotics, dope, opioids, opiates, really the same family that we're talking about here. A lot of those words are used interchangeably, but it's important to note that because we often switch the term we're using. So Vikes, Vicodin, Bud is weed, marijuana, that's for tree, flame, a lot of different words for Mary Jane. Jim Candy, steroids. Jim, G-Y-M, Jim Candy, steroids. Molly, Anybody see my girlfriend Molly is referring to MDMA or ecstasy? Georgia Homeboy, think of the initials, Georgia, G, Home, H, Boy, B. GHB, that's a date rape drug, GHB. Horse, heroin, that one's been around for a while. Heroin, called a million different things, China White, boy, dope. Tango and Cash is fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. We'll talk about that a little bit in my presentation here. You see this on the screen if you're watching this at home. Anybody have any idea what these things are? Little latexy, maybe $50 sized containers. These are used to store THC extract or honey oil or wax or butter. It's basically concentrated weed. So it's down to the base of the THC. It's a very sticky, viscous, molasses-like material. You can't just drop a dab of that into your jeans pocket because you're not going to be able to get it out. So you put it in this latexy container, and it's easy with something to scoop out, drop into a G pen or a vape pen or something like that, and smoke it. So that's what that is. You see a lot of those in pockets, and law enforcement will find these things and might find them in your kids' bedrooms, that kind of thing. They're not to hold coins, which I've heard a few times. Precious gems, that's not true. These things, similar to the last one, little tiny Ziploc bags with images on them. Okay, you can see in the photo here, a little bit bigger than the size of a dime there. Lots of logos and stuff like Batman and hearts and the Playboy bunny and Superman and lips on there and stuff. What those are gem bags, right? These are little tiny Ziploc bags used for bagging up dope. I have seen some buds of marijuana put in there, shake kind of marijuana, not really common. Usually it's powdered narcotics that are in here, sometimes crack rocks, but usually powdered drugs are in there. Do you know anyone who's overdosed on drugs or alcohol? Of course, everybody in this room probably knows somebody or has heard about somebody who's overdosed on drugs or alcohol. This is not a big city problem. This is an everywhere problem, okay? And that's why we're here trying to be transparent about it, because it's not a Chicago thing or a Milwaukee thing. It's really across the country, so that's what we have to be aware of and get this word out and be transparent about it. Our coalition has written for grants, and we've been able to, through some of those grants, been able to put up billboards throughout the county. You may have seen some of these for a little while with public health and the medical examiner's office in Walworth County. We're tracking overdose deaths. For a while, drug overdose deaths were about on pace with traffic fatalities. And then more often than not, we've seen a few more, especially recently, overdose deaths eclipsing the rates of traffic fatalities here in Walworth County. For a while, we were averaging about 20 to 25 overdose deaths. So again, it's not a big city problem. It's really here as well. Some of the signs and symptoms of opioid or narcotic use are listed here. This is, again, not an all-inclusive list. Just because someone exhibits something on this list doesn't necessarily mean that they are on narcotics, but oftentimes, this is a common list of things that people experience or you can observe when someone is on prescription narcotics, heroin, fentanyl, that type of thing that we're talking about. Pinpoint pupils. So the pupil, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence, is a black part of your eye. And pinpoint pupils is they will go all the way down to the size of a pinpoint. And despite changes in light that person is in, they will remain at that pinpoint pupil, very, very small. Lethargy, that's like sloth-like movements, very, very slow speech. People who are on this will often be on the nod. You've heard that. That's because they're having a very difficult time staying awake. Mouth open, drooling, sometimes that kind of thing. Disorientation, sweating. Oftentimes some of these things come in greater exhibition when someone is on withdrawals in between use. Track marks, if someone is using intravenously with a needle, repeatedly going into the same vein in the same exact site is difficult, right? Because you're going to end up collapsing your vein. So what you have to do is move along that vein, up or down, choose a different vein, go between your toes, that kind of thing, to hide the use. And that repeated use of a needle along a stretch of vein will cause a track or a line. So that's what the track marks are. Paraphernalia, I'll get into some photos of that in a second. And then drug slang, which we talked about and is always changing based on pop culture, based on region in the country, that kind of thing. Some of the opioid paraphernalia photos are here. You can see needles. That's obviously an easy one. Plenty of times during law enforcement contacts on a traffic stop or something like that, we'll find just the orange caps, on the floorboards of a car, indicator, right? You can see in that upper left-hand corner of my photo there's some more of those gem bags I talked about, some foils, tea lights. A lot of times in the movies and stuff, you think of heroin use or narcotics use cooked up on a spoon. Not as common as tea light cookers in my experience. Tea light cookers you can buy in a big bag from the dollar store or whatever in bulk, right? They're very, very cheap. You toss that candle out, or you might use that candle for a heat source. But then that base of that tea light cooker is a perfect, the base of the tea light is a perfect cooker for your dope. A lot of times how it works, my experience talking to these folks with substance use disorder, they'll get that powdered dope, or they'll get that pill that they are able to crush up, introduce a little bit of water to that, not always like a sterile water, obviously not Avion directly from the bottle. I've talked to people who've only had a little bit of soda around to dump in there. And then I've talked to people who their mouth has been too dry. So then they'll have their buddy spit in the tea light cooker, and then they will shoot that into their vein. Mix a little bit of water with that dope, introduce a heat source that mixes it up. And you take the syringe, draw it up. A lot of these pictures here have these little cottons. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, those dark look like little pebbles. That filter, that acts as a filter on the end of the syringe, because when you introduce that heat source to that dope with the spit or the water or whatever the liquid is in there, there'll be some char right on the top of that liquid. And then that cotton on the end of the needle will act as a filter to get rid of some of that char, so you're not shooting that into your vein. Lower left-hand corner there's some Suboxone. Buprenorphine is the name of the active ingredient in that. That's medication that's prescribed to folks who have substance use disorder for narcotics to help suppress the cravings a little bit. I can tell you this, for a matter of fact, Suboxone strips are sold on the street just as commonly as dope is. You can see some foils there, baggy corners, another sign of drug use. A lot of sandwich baggies where the corner is ripped off. No legitimate reason that I've ever found in my 45 years of life to rip off the corner of a sandwich bag and tie it in a little knot, except to bag up dope. So you come across a whole bunch of sandwich baggies with just the corners ripped off, a pretty good indicator you might have someone bagging up drugs there. You can see more of those gem bags in the center, more of those tea light cookers with those cottons in there. Folded up aluminum foil, commonly referred to as a bindle. You can do that with paper as well, but a lot of times with powdered narcotics, you're talking about aluminum foil into little squares. Okay, fentanyl. As I mentioned, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. Fentanyl is approximately 80 times the potency of morphine. So it's a lab made. Whereas a lot of these other narcotics that we're talking about, illicit street heroin, that kind of thing, that's a derivative of the poppy plant. Afghanistan, Myanmar, Burma, big source countries for a lot of the world's opium derived from the poppy plant. Not the case with fentanyl. Fentanyl is synthetic. So you got smart folks in a lab mixing molecules and that kind of thing. And I don't know what, I'm not going to pretend I'm a pharmaceutical scientist here or anything, but it's made in the lab. So it's a lot more powerful than morphine is. Then that means, in turn, obviously a lot more deadly. Fentanyl can come in the various forms you can see on the photo there. Pill form, powdered form, liquid form to be used intravenously. But most common that I've seen in my experience and here in Walworth County is that patch form in the upper right-hand corner. That's a transdermal patch, like an adhesive bandage kind of square thing you put on. And I can tell you for a fact, Walworth County investigators and deputies and municipal police officers have worked cases in recent years of these patches being stolen off of people who are under care. So those patches are used for like end-of-life chronic pain, hospice kind of thing, cancer patients with debilitating pain. And we have worked cases where nursing staff, family members have taken those patches off, replaced them with dead ones, with patches that are used up to use themselves or to sell. There also have been cases where on toxicology and autopsies, that kind of thing, after a fatality, they have found pieces of patches in people's stomachs from eating little pieces of the fentanyl patches. Obviously, you're talking about a serious addiction issue there. But again, fentanyl, lab-made. The sad thing that and the scary thing that I will say about fentanyl is I can tell you for a fact, we are seeing fentanyl in Walworth County cut into various other street drugs. There's no quality control on this stuff in this market, so dealers and suppliers are cutting little bits of fentanyl, sometimes actually without their knowledge, into powdered cocaine, heroin, that kind of thing. What does it do? It increases the potency. People whose immunity and tolerance is way up may react differently to this fentanyl, and they may spread the word that the dope is not stepped on or diluted because there's extra fentanyl in it. It's more powerful. It's also a lot of times more deadly. A couple of photos of overdose here. You can see the gentleman on the right-hand side has what's called a foam cone coming out of his mouth. Even though he's supine or laid out on his back, a lot of times we will see this when we go to fatal overdoses. When law enforcement walks into an overdose, a pulseless non-breather, PNB, or these type of situations, and we have an otherwise healthy individual there, and they are laying down and there is this frothy foam coming out of their nose and mouth, there is a very, very good chance it is an opioid overdose. When your body's deprived of oxygen, I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor up here, but when your body's deprived of oxygen and you go into hypoxia, that frothy kind of mess kind of comes out of your nose and your mouth because your lungs are filling up with fluid, and that fluid's got to go somewhere, oftentimes coming out of your nose and mouth. You can see these folks on the left there. There's a child in the back in the child seat. He looks, I think he's about 5 years old. That was a screen capture off of an officer's body camera. I can't remember if that's mom and dad or grandma and grandpa who were watching that child for a while. This happened a handful of years ago. Miraculously, both of those folks were brought back with Narcan or naloxone, which I may talk about again in a little while. Another pictures of overdose here. In the upper left-hand side, left-hand corner, you can see 3 vials, heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil. That's a little bit, it's a depiction of how much it can take to kill you. Obviously, that's a little bit for dramatic effect there. It depends on the potency of what's in each of those, and that heroin could be cut with an agent like Dorman or something like that. But you can see there's just a little pinch there of the heroin that could be potentially lethal. Fentanyl, you can see just a handful of grains, what looks like a handful of grains of salt in the bottom. And carfentanil, on the right-hand side of that picture, there's 1 single grain in there. Carfentanil is exponentially more powerful than fentanyl, often referred to as like an elephant tranquilizer. If it's an elephant tranquilizer, you can imagine what it would do to a human being. There have been cases in the United States of carfentanil being cut into street heroin and other drugs as well. Obviously, it's immediately fatal. What oftentimes happens, again, because there's no quality control with this trade of illicit narcotics, is people may be using the same amount that they've used for 10 years. But what they don't know, and their dealer didn't tell them, is that there's fentanyl cut into that half a gram, whatever it is that they're using at that time, and they immediately go out and they overdose. You can see these two folks in the bottom left-hand corner. I think that was in Memphis or Nashville a couple of years ago. That is taken off the internet because people filmed these folks dying on the street. They went Facebook Live, laughed at them, taunted them as they were basically dying in the street. I am not sure if those folks were brought back with naloxone or Narcan or not. That was viral a few years ago. And you can see they both appear to be 60-ish years old or greater. Substance use disorder does not discriminate based on age, race, socioeconomic status. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Upper right-hand corner, you can see this gal in the frozen pajamas still holding her mom's hand as she's laying down in the toy aisle, dying of an opioid overdose there. Talk just for a minute here on the Good Samaritan law. This is a law in Wisconsin that was put into place a handful of years ago, and I'm not going to pretend to be an attorney up here, but what the Good Samaritan law does is enact some legal protections for folks who do call a 911 after an overdose. So a lot of times law enforcement gets there and there's no one to be found because everybody else who was there has left. For the people that remain, sometimes in the past, before the Good Samaritan law, cops will get there. What do? They do an investigation, right? And some of the people who are there present may have drug paraphernalia or drugs themselves still on their person when searched. For those folks that call 911, do the right thing to save the person they were with who's overdosing and potentially dying. The Good Samaritan law does afford some protections for people who are found in possession of paraphernalia or drugs at that time. Who it does not protect is people who sell drugs to someone who then overdoses. Okay, that's important to keep in mind. When people use, they typically use in teams, in groups. Somebody has the driver's license. Somebody's got the car with non-expired tags. Somebody's got the money. Somebody's got the rig for using, meaning like a tie-off and maybe syringes and that type of thing, cottons, cookers. Somebody's got the rig. Somebody's got the plug, meaning the dealer that's down in Waukegan or Kenosha or Chicago or wherever, Racine, Beloit, one of these more source cities. We don't have a source city per se here in Walworth County, thank God. But some of those bigger cities where people are traveling to or tripping to, is that my warning? Holy buckets, talking too long. We don't have a source city in Walworth County, so people will go in teams. Somebody's got the car, somebody's got the plug, the money. But when people are found, they're found alone, right? So the Good Samaritan law does help to try, in my opinion, to defeat that, to get people to do the right thing, to encourage people to do the right thing, so we can save more lives. It doesn't help with the investigation or even that person who was there if everybody else, their friends, watch them overdose and then take off, clean the scene, and leave. We don't know what they've taken. Rescue doesn't know how to help them because there's no one there except for the person who's dying. Methamphetamine, a lot of people have seen these faces of methamphetamine on the internet, all these progressions of good-looking folks, and then a handful of years of, or sometimes less than that, of methamphetamine use. You can see they've lost a lot of their teeth. All those sores on their face and their body is from scratching from methamphetamine use. When you're going through withdrawals, oftentimes it feels like there are bugs just under the corners or the edges of your skin. So you dig it at your face because of the itching and that oftentimes paranoia that there is something crawling under your skin, that if you can just itch, you can get it out. Obviously a horrible drug, one that we saw a lot of use in Walworth County in 2013 13, 14, 15. Unfortunately, Walworth County actually led the state in clandestine methamphetamine labs for a couple years running, which through an active drug unit, we were able to uncover a bunch of those. Methamphetamine is a mixture of caustic chemicals, dangerous chemicals, lithium batteries, camp fuel, pseudoephedrine. It's a dangerous process because the air, the fluid, the fumes from the cooking of these chemicals becomes flammable. The air itself, the fluid, they're very, very dangerous. We have had meth lab explosions in Walworth County. And I could tell you from working these investigations in those years, I learned through working with big box department stores in Walworth County that oftentimes the most commonly shoplifted item from those big box stores were lithium batteries because of methamphetamine use. THC extract, I talked about this a little bit earlier. It is the base of marijuana. It is the active ingredient in marijuana. And THC extract, dabs, wax, honey oil, butter. This is not your grandfather's weed from the 70s. It was like 4 to 6% THC content. At its base, we're talking much greater than that, sometimes as much as 80-ish% THC content in this. So a little dab of this, the size of your pinky nail, dropped into an e-cigarette, which you can see there, could keep a middle schooler high all day, and it happens. It's very, very common. This is a lot more popular right now than the flower or the bud that used to exist. Synthetic marijuana is basically just plant material laid out on a piece of plywood and sprayed with chemicals. Very, very dangerous. There was a smoke shop in Delavan a handful of years ago that got shut down that was selling this stuff and making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on the sale of this. Highly addictive, very, very dangerous, and nothing to do with marijuana, nothing natural about it, everything about chemicals. And some of the users we talked to that were on this stuff on a daily basis said it was more addictive than crack cocaine, and they had used both. Prescription medication, very, very common, often traded, very, very common, sold in Walworth County and really all over. You can see some, I think that's Vyvanse, some OxyContin, and some Xanax. Lower right-hand corner of that photo, you can see the Xanax bars, often referred to as school buses. You can see why. They're rectangular, bright yellow, another drug slang for you to put in your pocket and use later when you hear that. So one thing I'll say about this is it's very, very common, and the risks associated with this are obviously addiction, but also overdose. People think, well, it's only Vyvanse, it's only Ritalin, it's only Xanax, Klonopin, whatever, that my doctor prescribed to me, so it's no big deal if I give you as my fellow classmate in freshman year one of these. Well, the prescription medication that's prescribed is based upon that patient, their metabolism, their needs, and traded to somebody else can often result in an overdose. You don't have to overdose only on narcotics. Overdose on Xanax or Klonopin or Alprazolam, any of those can absolutely happen. So you have to keep that in mind. And obviously trading medication, even if it's a prescription medication like this, can be a felony. Thank you. The path, Mike alluded to this earlier. A lot of times we think of substance use disorder as just somebody who just wants to get high, right? They want to get faded and they like to party. Not the case. And before I got into this coalition, and really before I started working in narcotics, I'll be honest, that was part of my belief. As I got into that, talked to hundreds of folks who've used and had substance use disorder and sold, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of paths to substance use disorder and this life of addiction. I talked to plenty of people who were high school athletes that blew a knee out and got addicted to prescription narcotics. I talked to women who had C-sections and left the hospital with a prescription for a narcotic like Percocet or Vicodin and got hooked. Well, the progression from that is it's oftentimes starts off legitimate and moves to illicit because you get addicted to that medication, then your doctor will eventually wean you off. Well, heroin's a quarter the price. The rough translation or formula is about $1 a milligram for a pill on the street. Who can afford that if you're taking a 40 milligram OP a day? That becomes very, very expensive and unsustainable, especially when you can't hold down a job. So the natural progression is prescription, legitimate to illicit. It's just what happens. It's very, very common, and it's not just for people who like to party and get high. Plenty of paths to that. But there are really only two ends to that tale, is incarceration or death. That's what ultimately happened to somebody who is living that life. So early intervention is obviously what the goal of this. That's why we're here sharing this information. And that's what I'll say about that. One thing that I've said thousands of times, and I'm nearing the end here, is always choose the hard right over the easy wrong. I've said that to my soldiers in the Wisconsin Army National Guard. I've said that to hundreds, if not thousands of people during my career in law enforcement. Anybody can make the wrong choice. It's very, very easy to say yes at a party to a pill passed from a friend. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to make that choice, to say no, to walk away, to call a parent for a ride. But that's the right choice. So I just strongly encourage everybody to always make that, choose the hard right over the easy wrong. And the last thing I'll say about this is that a lot of times where we're trying to defeat stigma and that label that people put on people who have substance use disorder and who are living this life. A lot of times I heard early on in law enforcement and outside of law enforcement that a drug overdose is a victimless crime, right? The person who was using is dead, so who cares? Could not disagree with that more. The reality is there are victims to a fatal overdose. That person who is living that life and likely struggling is a victim, but so are all the other people who are left behind, right? All the families, the children, the siblings, the parents, the friends, those are all the victims. So this is not a victimless crime when we're talking about fatal drug overdoses. We need to treat it as such, defeat this stigma, share this knowledge that you're getting today, encourage people to attend these type of presentations and get educated, because education is the only way we're going to defeat this, and it's a problem that's here. So I appreciate your time. Maybe questions at the end. I think I went over on my time, so I appreciate that. Thanks, Senta. I think I'll be turning it over to Bill here next. No? Who's next, Senta?
Please, Bonnie.
Okay. All right.
I can just,
Yes. Yeah. Let me see. Stand by.
My name is Veronique Wolf, or they know me as Bonnie at Walworth County Health and Human Services. And I've been working at Health and Human Services for about 14 years and have been in the mental health and substance use field for about 16 years now. So some of the things, I had a couple of things just to talk with you guys about of how do we know when somebody might be using and might be using more so than experimentation. So there can be some pretty subtle signs that we see. Teenagers with our peers, maybe with our parents, and like Mike had said, maybe even with our grandparents. It can be something as simple as isolation, maybe a decrease in activities, a decrease in family interaction. Maybe they were in having dinner every night with family, and now that has changed. So something subtle. Maybe it's something bigger where we see some of our peers in sports, and now they are no longer participating in sports. Maybe work has decreased for them. Friendships. Maybe we see a change in friends where once we were in a group of active peers in clubs, and now we have a switch in peers where they might be seen more with struggles. Maybe our parents, they're sleeping more. They aren't getting up like they used to. They're going out more. Maybe they lost a job. So different signs that we see. And how do we approach it? And a huge point is don't be afraid to talk about drugs. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to your peers about concerns that you might have. Even if you're completely off, it's brought up, it's out there in the open. Maybe your peers have had more depression or have been agitated more. Bring that up. Ask about use. This is a difficult, uncomfortable situation that this can bring on to teenagers, parents, especially if we're teenagers and we're talking to our parents about these. If we're talking to our peers about this stuff, bring it up. Being uncomfortable is okay. If we have a situation, and maybe it's something we don't have to talk to our parents about, but we know that they might be using. We know that their drinking has become significant. Maybe we were in the car with a parent that we knew was drinking. Where do we go? That can be a really hard and scary for anybody. For teenagers, it's going to a trusted adult. And what if you don't have a trusted adult? Who do you go to? If there is a teacher that you connect with, if you are in a church group, or if there is a pastor, a priest that you can go talk to. We have a few different hotlines, crisis lines, text lines that you can reach out to. And these are actually really easily accessible just by Googling them. Going maybe to another parent and asking their thoughts on what they could do. It's hard when it's your friend, and I want to bounce off of what Corey said. Sometimes the hardest thing is the right thing. And when we look at it as we are caring about somebody, we are caring for somebody, for somebody's well-being, we are making that right decision to help them. Other than reaching out to support lines, trusted adults or teachers, pastors, church communities, other parents, there are ways to talk to professional therapists. There are hospitals that you can call, that you can contact if maybe you don't know the direction to go in. Walworth County has the crisis line that is always available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. if you connect with somebody, if you think you're connecting with the right person and it's not the right person, don't be deterred to stop. Continue looking until you find somebody who is able to truly help, to truly listen, to get the support that is needed. I think that's all that I had. So I'm going to pass it along to Sarah.
All right. So my name is Sarah. I am also a therapist along with Vonnie in the Behavioral Health Unit over at Walworth County Health and Human Services. I actually just graduated back in 2019 with my master's degree in social work. I interned at Walworth County and I loved it so much I wanted to come back. So right when I graduated and got out of school, I knew I had to get back in right away because I love the atmosphere so much and everything that the Behavioral Health Unit in Walworth County as a whole really stands for and does. So some of the main things I'm kind of going to be talking about tonight is reasons why people might turn to drugs or alcohol. Why might people use drugs or alcohol? And a lot of that kind of goes off what Corey said with some of the baseline things he said is, a lot of people think, they just want to get high. They just want to party. They want to have fun. But there's actually a lot of different factors that can play a role into reasons why someone might turn to alcohol or drugs. So for peers specifically or young teens, a lot of times it's just that social aspect. You're young, you're in school. Sometimes that's the in thing. That's what people are doing. They're getting together, they're smoking weed, and that's just how it is sometimes. You want to fit in, you want to feel accepted, so you join into maybe, or you start to experiment. That's another one is experimentation. Middle school, high school, those are those ages when you start to kind of gain more of that autonomy. You are wanting more of that independence and you start to test some of that independence. Instant gratification. When someone uses a substance, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, there really is no, lesser evil of a substance, like a healthier one or a not so healthy one. All substances are substances. They impact you. They impact how you function. And they have an impact on how you might feel, how you might act, behaviors. And a lot of that is that instant gratification, that relief. And when kids are maybe more young and they're impressionable, they're under stress, getting that instant gratification can kind of be addicting to them in a way, something they've never felt before. Also learn behaviors from environment. If parents are using, if someone grows up in a home where parents drink more frequently, where parents have used drugs or children have been taken out of the home and they've seen their parents under the influence of drugs, kind of having some of those learned behaviors of watching those who are maybe supposed to be taking care of you use substances, thinking that that's normal, or kind of being able to, just be around that environment, thinking that that's how people cope maybe, which is another reason is more of that coping, helping to numb different emotions or feelings is why someone might use drugs or alcohol. A lot of untreated mental health symptoms as well. If people don't seek out the right therapy or don't have someone that they feel that they can turn to, a lot of times being able to numb some of those uncomfortable feelings, decrease some of that stress that they might feel, escape from their problems. Being able to get high is definitely a way to do that. And if you don't have someone to talk to about it, a lot of times it's just turning to that substance because they feel like they have no one that they maybe are able to trust to do that. A lot of boredom as well. We hear that with peers too. Little kind of guidance by parents or maybe rules or guidelines, not a lot of oversight by parents. Mixed with that boredom can lead to more of that experimentation, not being involved in sports or extracurricular activities, wanting to do something, wanting to feel something. As we talked about too, injury surgery. I know that we see that a lot is people will have a surgery or they will be playing, significant amount of sports and get hurt and they'll get prescribed something. And if there isn't that good oversight from a doctor, that it can really be a dangerous slippery slope and lead to other things when it wasn't intended to. Genetics as well. A lot of times people feel that genetics might not play a part in it, but there are some research that has been done that's shown that there are specific proteins that can really influence someone's ability to kind of need substances or crave substances more, kind of create that dependence on them. Then kind of going into the risks of using. As we know, there are a lot of risks with using drugs or alcohol. They impact your body significantly, but they also can impact others around you as well. So causing a lot of legal trouble, like fines, incarceration, prison time, a lot of charges, maybe some serious charges, health concerns. When we say health concerns, that would be like overdose, causing other, physical symptoms that might be distressing to you. And more specifically, the brain being one of your most important organs. Substances have such a big impact on your brain development, and your brain structure. Tolerance, dependence, withdrawal, and overdose. Those are all different things. And by tolerance, I mean, maybe starting drinking a glass of wine. And being able to feel some of the effects of that. But over time, as you drink a glass of wine each day, then needing more to feel the effects that you once felt from one glass of wine and increasing to more and more. So really building that tolerance till maybe it's an unhealthy amount. Dependence, meaning that you need that substance to function, to get up and go to work, to fulfill your obligations. You need a substance, you depend on it. And withdrawal, that looks more of when you have a substance, you're using a drug, and then you immediately try to stop. Getting those different symptoms from withdrawal, which can look like many different things depending on the substance you're using, but it can be anywhere from vomiting, shaking, sweating, nausea, a lot of different things. Alcohol withdrawal is very dangerous. People can actually die from alcohol withdrawal. It can alter your brain structure, like I said. It can alter that function, the chemistry of your brain, youth especially, in that more critical part of their life where their brain is doing that important developing. It can really change the overall anatomy and structure of a youth's brain if they are using at younger ages. It can really impact that prefrontal cortex, which doesn't finish developing until like your mid-20s, around 25. That really has a lot of impact on your decision making. So if you start maybe using drugs when you're younger, when you're a teen, and wonder why you maybe don't make some good decisions as you go along your life and you get involved with more substances, it's because those substances are really impacting your prefrontal cortex and how you make decisions, how you think through things. Increased risk of car accidents. Driving under the influence, whether it's drugs or alcohol, is always dangerous, and that's always an increased risk. It can provoke worsen mental health symptoms. If you already have anxiety, depression, it can bring out some paranoia or delusional thinking. Substances can definitely greater impact some mental health symptoms that you're already experiencing. Loss of relationships, family supports. This can look like people who maybe were once there for you are no longer there for you due to your use or how you might be acting. They might be turned off by your behaviors. They might have been supportive to you for a very long time, but because addiction is so prevalent and it's consistent and it never, fully goes away, someone who has an addiction, even if they're not using it, it's something that's really kind of always a part of them and they're always going to have to cope with and learn to manage. So sometimes it can be difficult. It can cause a lot of family issues. Children, taking children out of the home, a lot of CPS involvement, usually with any type of substance use, loss of children through that. Loss of job, that's a big one. It's very hard to keep a job when you are under the influence of substances or trying to obtain substances. Loss of housing due to not being able to hold down a job and not being able to work through difficult emotions is one of the biggest ones. Like I've mentioned previously, a lot of people use those substances to mask or maybe try to numb some of those uncomfortable feelings that they have that they've maybe never appropriately dealt with in therapy. And so not learning to deal or cope with those emotions in an effective way can really be detrimental because then you just kind of continue that behavioral cycle of continuing to use to need to feel better and mask those emotions. Anything else or you wanted to add, or I think that's all I had. All right, thanks.
So my name is Robert Hanna. I've been in recovery for 2 years, 7 months. I guess I could start with my childhood. My childhood wasn't very good. My parents were both alcoholics, drug users. Mom was very abusive. I lost my dad at 16 years of age to suicide. I started using drugs right after. I didn't really, I guess, develop a habit. I'd experienced drugs, and as I got older, it got worse. I had a very good job. I was making really good money. Around the age of 22 to 25, I ended up having a surgery on my hands, and I got prescription pills. Before that, I experienced with cocaine. Anything I could really experience with, I didn't make a habit out of it, but I experienced it. But once I got prescribed pills from the doctor, I had the surgery and I was getting, 60 Vicodin here, and I would take one and I took them like I was supposed to, and then they made me feel better. So I got, what they would call addictive personality. I got into it and I would take more and more and more. And then it turned into where I thought I needed them all the time. Eventually the doctor had cut me off, and I had a friend at work that had Oxycontins. So it worked out great. I'd go to work and I'd buy them from him. I was spending $30 to $40 for a 60 milligram Oxycontin. I was taking 3 a day, sometimes 4. I ended up going into the methadone clinic around 2015, thinking that would help. When I got in the methadone clinic, I was there and I thought, this was going to be a good thing. I thought it would help me get off everything. It actually made it worse. I slept most of my life away. The doctor kept upping my dose. And so in 2016, I walked out of there and tried to do it on my own. And I ended up catching a cocaine charge in 2017. I went to enter drug court. It was a long court process. So I didn't really get clean right away. I was trying to. I ended up trying heroin for the first time before I went into drug court, and I overdosed. I died for 3 minutes. Eventually I got into drug court, and I want to say that's probably the best thing for me. Maybe it's not for everybody, but if you want it, you got to do it. It helps because you can't always do it alone. I wasn't a very good father while I was on drugs. I have a 14-year-old, an 8-year-old, and now I have a 1-month-old. But my 2 older sons really went through a lot. I guess I can say that what they went through, I guess my mistakes might have been good for them, but I wouldn't wish it on anybody. So I graduated drug court last year, January 23rd. So it's been a year I've been out of drug court. My recovery's been great. Like I said, I got a 1-month-old son now. Everything's good. I'm not saying it's easy when you're an addict, but if you want your life to be good, you have to stay sober. And I have a full-time job. I get up every morning without an alarm, and I love it. So, and I guess I hope that all this educates everybody in high school or whoever's watching. So ask for help if you need help. Thank you, guys.
Senator, do you want me to go up there? Okay.
You dress better than me.
And your mic is ready for you, Bill?
Please,
And
that way
then-
or that way? Please. Okay. Thank you, Senna.
You're welcome.
My name is Bill. I've lived in Walworth County for 15 years. It's a great place to be, and fortunate to be in Lake Geneva. And I've been a part of the Walworth County Drug and Alcohol Coalition for about, I guess, 2 years. The reason I became involved with them was I lost my daughter in 2018 to a drug overdose. And so I felt like maybe I could, first of all, it might be therapeutic for me. And secondly, maybe I could give back to the community in some way to maybe prevent someone, one person would be worth it from a drug overdose. So with that said, I'm going to kind of take you through a story about my daughter and what happened. It's kind of difficult to talk about, so bear with me. And I'll begin with back in November 2018, actually on November 9th of 2018, a Friday night. At about 9:15 p.m., the phone rang. It was my former wife, Patty. She was very distraught on the phone. And she informed me that my daughter's boyfriend had called her and said that Beth Ann, my daughter, she was Elizabeth Ann, but we called her Beth Ann, was being rushed to St. Mary's Hospital in Milwaukee, had collapsed in her apartment or in her condo in Milwaukee, and was being rushed by the EMTs to St. Mary's. She was unconscious. She was not breathing. She had not breathed for quite a while, possibly 6, 8, 10 minutes, and her heart had stopped. She was laying on the floor. She was revived. Her heart, they gave her CPR and she was revived and got her heart started. They administered aggressive, oxygen and so forth therapy to get her breathing again. She actually had to have that all the way to the hospital and through the emergency room. Her heart stopped again on the way to the hospital, and they revived her once again. There were never any police called to this incident, to the scene. At the emergency room, tests determined that my daughter was positive for cocaine and fentanyl. There was evidence of extended oxygen deprivation. She was on full life support, intubated, and in critical condition. My former wife, Patty, was in the emergency room. I was on my way that night to the emergency room when we were having an early snowstorm. I literally don't remember driving to St. Mary's Hospital from Lake Geneva. But Patty was told by the ER doctors about the drugs. Prior to that, this was thought to be possibly an asthma attack that she had had, because she did have asthma and she was on medication. But that changed in the emergency room. We later learned that the EMTs were never informed of the use of drugs and a possible overdose while they were at the condo treating her. Perhaps had they known, they could have administered Narcan, which is a life-saving drug that might have got her breathing again and might have saved her life. It's possible she had been without oxygen too long for that to have worked, though. She, of course, was eventually moved to the intensive care unit. I arrived at the hospital around 11 p.m. It was completely dark in the ICU waiting room. The only person there was Patty, and we sat there and just looked at each other in complete, we're just out of our minds. We met with the ICU doctor. He came out of the door like almost in the movies, walked through the door, put his arm around both of us and took us back to a consultation room. He told us that she had suffered from an overdose and that there were indications of significant brain damage. You cannot imagine what that's like. Beth Ann had just turned 34 years old. We had talked about teenagers, people in their 20s, but you know, this can affect you in your 30s, 40s, or even later. She had never been in trouble for anything in her life, not in school, not anything. I don't think she even had a traffic violation. She graduated with honors from Cedarburg High School and went on to get a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in psychology. She then went back to school to get a certificate to be a paralegal. And she became a paralegal and worked for a major personal liability law firm in Milwaukee. One call. I remember seeing some samples of her work, such as affidavits, briefs, court filings, and so forth. They were brilliant. She was a very intelligent young woman, analytical, and a great writer. But sometime during the summer of 2018, something changed. I think it was partly the people that she began running around with. She became distant from several girlfriends that she had been close with all the way back to elementary school. There were signs. I didn't see them. Beth Ann and I had a good relationship, but not as good as she had with her mother. Christmas 2017, I remember we had dinner, Beth Ann and I did, at a very nice restaurant in Milwaukee. She told me, I noticed that she seemed to be moving around in her chair like she was in pain. She told me that she had slipped on the ice outside of her condo. Feet went out from under her. She was carrying some presents, and she fell on her right backside and later was diagnosed as having 2 fractured ribs. Anybody who's had a fractured rib knows how painful that is. I asked her about pain, and she said she'd been administered or been prescribed pain medicine. It was one of the codons. And I cautioned her about the use of that. She said that was working. During that summer of 2018, some prescription drug painkiller opioid went missing from her mom's residence. In addition, some cash that her mom had left on the dining room table for a cleaning service never got to the cleaning service. When Patty got home, she was informed that they never got it, that the money wasn't there. Beth Ann had been asked to come by her mom's condo during that time to check on it because she was gone for 2 weeks, which she did. She was confronted with that by Patty, but she denied knowing anything about it, either instant. Also that summer, her sister-in-law mentioned to me around July 4th that she did not think Beth Ann was right. There was something not right about her. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she said, you know, she's just not friendly, disobedient, sort of ugly, a different person. As I mentioned, her two closest friends hadn't seen her in 3 or 4 months. These are friends that went all the way back to the first grade. So over the next several days, immediate and extended family members held a vigil in the intensive care reception room at St. Mary's, praying for a miracle. She was examined on Sunday and Monday by 2 independent neurologists. We were told her prognosis was grim, was poor. On November 12th, Beth Ann died, surrounded by her mother, myself, her brother, other family members, and her closest friends. An autopsy determined her death was due to an accidental drug overdose. I spoke with the Milwaukee County pathologist who told me it was fentanyl that killed her. Apparently, they theorized that she had taken some other drug, possibly cocaine, to your point earlier, and fentanyl was laced in with it. I don't know that Beth Ann knew that. I don't think she would have taken it. The pathologist told me that she would have survived the cocaine. She also had some morphine, indications of morphine in her system, but it was the fentanyl that killed her. It doesn't take much. Almost a pinhead amount of fentanyl can kill you. Beth Ann had registered, unbeknownst to me, but her mother knew about it, as an organ donor. She had also discussed it with her mom, as I said. Her kidney and liver went to a man who was listed as #1 nationally on the list in need of those organs, and would have died within 5 days had he not gotten it. Her other kidney and a part of her pancreas were also donated. I might mention that the last time I had a lot of fun with Beth Ann was late October 2018, just a matter of weeks before she died. And we went to a nice restaurant in Milwaukee downtown. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was chilly out. We watched a football game, had a burger, had a few laughs, a couple of beers. Beth Ann seemed as happy as I had seen her in a long time. And she looked good, but it was a cold day and she had on heavy sweater and so forth. I didn't realize or notice, but I was told later, I actually noticed it when she was in the hospital, that she had lost at least probably 10 to 15 pounds. That's a sign that I didn't notice. She also that day, her eyes weren't quite right. They mentioned dilated pupils. I don't know if they were dilated or not, but she didn't look right. Her eyes weren't right. And the main thing I noticed was that she was nervous. She was fidgety. She was moving around in her chair, looking around, talking, carrying on a conversation, acting normally, but just very nervous. I don't know if that had anything to do with the drugs, but I suspect it probably did. So this is a terrible tragedy for me and my family. No one in our family has ever been through or experienced anything like this, but it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone, and it can happen to them at just about any age. It's horrific. It is sad, and the grief is beyond, you just cannot imagine. Fortunately, my son is in Houston. I have 2 beautiful grandboys. They're in their preschool years. He's an assistant coach for the Houston Texans NFL team. And my lovely wife here with me, and many other family and many other friends. But this is something that, you never recover from. Those of you who have lost a loved one, especially a child or even an adult child, which of course Beth Ann was, 34 years old and gone. She had her whole life in front of her. She had her future, and it's just tragic. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, folks, for sharing your stories and giving some expertise advice. Now, the key thing, is there any questions at all for any of the panelists? Yes, Kim, can you, and take it, we'll speak real loud.
Quick question for Robert. I was curious about your attempts at recovery. First said the meth clinic just wasn't the right fit, and ultimately it was the drug court that worked. What was the differentiating piece for you? No,
I believe that
What she asked.
Okay, so I believe that the methadone clinic was more of a crutch because you were getting off another drug or getting off drugs to go on to another drug that was potentially controlled, but it's like getting a pain prescription from the doctor. So when being on that, I don't know, like I said, it was almost worse than being on the pills because it affected me differently. I nodded out more. Like on the pills, I never really got that bad. But yeah, the methadone, because you'd go in and they would tell you, well, how are you feeling? And of course, me being an addict, I'm not feeling very good. So up your dose. And I think at one point I was at 190 milligrams of methadone. And you go in the morning, you dose, and you go home, and I'd sleep most of the day. I had my kids asking me to go outside and play, and here I was sleeping. Yeah, I'll be outside in a little bit, and I'd fall asleep and sleep all day. I ruined my relationship with my first kid's mother because of that, because the addiction and all that.
how did the drug court work differently?
The drug court, a lot more different. Like, I guess there was people in drug court that could still be on like Suboxone and stuff because it's prescribed for them, and that was their choice. I didn't want to do any more of that because I looked at it as a crutch. But drug court helped me because the fact is that there was a lot more stuff that the methadone clinic didn't do. So like I go into the methadone clinic and get urine tested to see other drugs in there. And I had other drugs in my system. They still continued to keep me there. Drug court gave you options, or if you didn't do this, you were going to get this, community service, or you're going to go to jail. You didn't get that at the methadone clinic. They just said, oh, you're not going to phase or you have to take home anything. You got to come back and just keep dosing every day. And they just kept you there. So drug court helped me too, plus all the groups that I went through. And I felt me as a person, I was ready to change because of going through all what I went through all those years. It was time. So like they say, you got to do it yourself. You got to make the choice. But drug court really helped me with all the groups. A lot of good people in drug court.
Is there any other question?
I know that you have a strong support network. And I know that when you were in school, you had people that you were able to work with and, as you said, believe in you.
Yeah.
What would you tell kids in terms who are struggling with addiction and struggling, with the concerns like you had? What would you tell them about seeking out that trusted adult or that friend?
I would think anybody that they feel comfortable asking help, ask for help. There's a lot of different teachers in school that view people differently. They view you as a troublemaker, and that kid could be going through a drug use and causing problems because they're going through that. And you got a teacher that doesn't want to deal with that person. I used to go to study hall and get kicked out before I even got in study hall. See you later. I don't want you in here. But there was other teachers that, wanted me to succeed. I believe that if there's teachers like that, those are the people that you need to reach out to.
So if you had a teacher that, or and it doesn't have to be a teacher, it
Right.
could be a secretary, it could be a nurse, it could be anybody. But if the first person you went to wasn't compassionate or they didn't listen, the simple message was to just keep looking for somebody that's going to listen.
Yes. Don't stop talking. Find the person that's going to listen to you. Because when you stop, I shut down a lot in school. I didn't, You know, when I got turned down by a teacher, I just acted up more. I went and did something else. Kind of like when my dad passed away. My dad committed suicide. I didn't talk to nobody. Kept everything in. I tried to numb the pain with drugs. And it wasn't as bad as when I got into my, 20s. When I got in my 20s, I had already had a kid, and I had another one on the way. But I still chose to use drugs because I didn't open up to people. I didn't know who to talk to. Once you learn how to talk about it and talk to people, I think that's the easier route.
That it's okay to talk about.
That it's okay, yes.
Thank you.
Aren't successful enough.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I like to thank Katie because she had a lot to do with it too. Everybody in drug court. Yes. Thank you.
So it's each individual, and it takes, like I said,
Yes, it's your choice to do it, but the support helps.
keep it up.
Thank you.
Another quick question for the coalition. I've seen in other counties or areas in the past years where they have signage campaigns. One that struck me as a good one was parents who host lose the most, to really minimize those parties that are going under the radar or being reported with whatnot. How do we get active as a county with something like that? Do we have options, or is that something that's available to us to look into?
Well, I know several years ago, the sheriff's department was actively involved in that, because I know that we so yeah, so working with the sheriff's department, we had banners, and they were large banners, and we distributed them to several schools that wanted them, and put them up in a prominent place. I want to say, I think when we placed them, that was right around graduation, which of course is one of the most significant times of the year. One of the things that we have done in the past as a coalition is we present to high schools in the county. We do a presentation for freshmen, and we've also worked on a presentation for seniors. And the presentations are not the same. They're similar, but not the same, because we look at seniors a little bit differently because of the choices and the concerns. But we try to do that around prom and graduation. So I think your point's a really good one in terms of how we try to get this message out. And I guess anybody that has any really good, strong ideas, to help us, we want to do that. This is a good step tonight.
So my son graduated this district last year, and I approached our superintendent when I saw these signs in East Troy, asking specifically how we get a hold of these. And I tried to go through, Department of Transportation, hit that end. I didn't know where to go, but he didn't seem to know much about it either. So, as we all sit here and recognize, we know plenty of people, and the party scene, it just continues to get worse after what's gone on with COVID this year. So clearly it's compounded. So I kind of took the mentality as a parent in this community, what are we waiting for? What does it take to just get the signage out there? I mean, do we need approval? Is it a budget thing? Do we need to fundraise? What do we need to do?
Mhm.
Because there are plenty of scenarios that are, we have prom and graduation coming up here weeks away. And I understand schools can't host assemblies so much, but virtually getting this, of course, in people's hands is a start. But then again, the follow-through piece is we need momentum and sustainability, because one-stop shopping isn't going to do it.
Mhm.
So I guess that as a parent in this community for years, I'm like, how do we keep fighting this fight? Because I continue to see it over and over again.
I guess, one of the things that's really important, and we've as a coalition, we've talked about, how do we get more people involved? Now, certainly COVID has put a kibosh on our meetings. When We have probably trained, we do Narcan trainings as part of Walkodac. And up until the COVID piece hit, we 4 times a year we would be training people in the administration of Narcan, as an example. And we were averaging 50 people or more per session. So we were able to, through our meetings, we were having regular attendance. COVID has certainly messed with that. We struggle with how do we get more people involved in it, as opposed to just the board and, you know, in this specific cohort. I think when COVID finished, you know, when we get through this time with COVID, it would be my hope, you know, we go back to the regular meeting schedules and we really start to do a hard reach out in the schools.
But is that marketing still available?
The
But is the marketing that something along those lines, is that currently available where we have to wait to get that, or can we just start getting it in community hotspots and then we're gonna start generating some awareness? I mean, I've got active parent friends with kids of all ages and stages that, I mean, it's gotta start somewhere. So if it starts with the school community, or, you know, some public spaces, it's in a different platform, and the other kind of awareness walk, let's just start getting some marketing out there.
Yeah, so the Parents Post campaign is something that's through DOT and is free if you're looking for materials that we can definitely distribute through Coalition. Alliance for Wisconsin Youth is a big partner with the Parents Post, which is a big partner of ours. So those materials are readily available. It's just a matter of distributing them. And I guess recently we've taken more of a focus on drug use, I guess. And maybe alcohol awareness campaign should be our next step and start to address these issues and come into spring and graduation and coming into the summer. That's something that we can definitely do. If you would take a card with a Walkodac, we're just walkodac@gmail.com and send me your contact information. We can connect with you and let you know what's going on with that campaign.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, we meet the second.
All right, is there any other questions? Yes.
As a principal of the district, I've been able to see Mike speak to our kids here at high school before and hidden in plain sight and all that stuff. But since I have you here, I guess one of the questions I would ask is, what are you seeing right now for our middle and high school age kids as like their current trends? Like, building I work in, we've noticed less vaping this year, which we're always, yay, like that's good, right? You know, but part of me is also wondering like, what's next? What are other people seeing? So anybody that can speak to that, I would appreciate that. And myself and our staff, parents.
I don't.
I'll attempt to answer that question. So the question, I don't know if it went out over the internet, was what are some of the trends that we're seeing now in the school districts? I can tell you that changes a lot too. I'm not currently in the drug unit, but a lot of it depends on the market and law enforcement and everything. When we really hammered on methamphetamine in 14-15 timeframe, we did see that decreased a lot in the county. In 12 and 13, there was we had a lot of cases for big dealers that was on cocaine. So after the cocaine, we put a stomp on that. Then the methamphetamine rose up, hammered on the methamphetamine for a bunch of cases, and then the opioid really took off. I think, and this is just my thoughts from my experience and what I've read and who I've talked to, I almost wonder if recently some of the vaping has decreased because of the concern for COVID being a respiratory thing at times. So I think there has been a little bit of a again, my opinion, reluctance to vape because of the fear of COVID. That could have something to do with it. There was also a pretty big campaign, anti-vaping campaign, and I watch Roku shows, and the vaping things are all over the commercials, which is awesome. So I think that's helped a lot. The accessibility of THC extract, really, we've seen that all the way down to the middle school level. It's very, very easy to conceal. The hidden in plain sight thing that you referenced is a room. We've done this with Health and Human Services in the past, where we set up a mock bedroom. It's like a teenager's bedroom, and we hide drug paraphernalia in there. I say hide in air quotes because it's often it's plain sight, right? So it's just things to look for, hides and things like that we've commonly seen paraphernalia and drugs concealed in. So we've done that in the past. It really does change year to year. Cocaine seems to be really big right now, and that does get down to the teenager level. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of fentanyl being cut into cocaine, which is not. You got two different things. You got a stimulant mixed with an opioid there. So those two things fighting inside a body is incredibly dangerous. So difficult to put your finger on the actual thing that's happening right now, because it does constantly change based on market, based on public ad campaigns.
Corey, if I could just add to that, there's also recently been pens